The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the dusty mercantile, and Beatrice Donovan pressed her gloved hand against the window, taking in the ramshackle buildings of Ventura, California, with a sinking heart that threatened to pull her right through the floorboards. She had traveled 3,000 miles from Boston with nothing but 2 trunks and a letter informing her that her aunt had passed away, leaving her a small inheritance and a life she never imagined living. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to terrify a 22-year-old woman who had never ventured beyond the cobblestone streets of New England. The driver opened the door, extending his weathered hand to help her down. Beatrice gathered her dark blue traveling dress and stepped into the California sunshine, immediately overwhelmed by the heat that seemed to press against her like a heavy blanket. The main street stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that looked as though a strong wind might blow them over. Horses tied to hitching posts swished their tails at flies, and a few men in worn hats and dusty boots stopped to stare at the newcomer. She smoothed her skirts and tried to ignore the attention, focusing instead on retrieving her belongings. The driver hauled her trunks down with a grunt, setting them in the dirt beside her. Beatrice reached into her small purse to pay him, her fingers trembling slightly as she counted out the coins. "Thank you kindly, miss," the driver said, tipping his hat. "You got someone meeting you here?" "I'm to inquire at the land office about my aunt's property," Beatrice replied, hoping her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartford." Recognition flickered across the driver's weathered face. "Ah, the Hartford place. Fine woman she was. My condolences on your loss. Land office is just down the way, past the saloon. Can't miss it." Before she could respond, he had climbed back onto his perch and urged the horses forward, leaving Beatrice standing alone with her trunks in the middle of a town that felt as foreign as the moon. She took a deep breath, tasting dust and sage on her tongue, and looked around for someone who might help her with her luggage. That was when she first saw Owen Lawson. He emerged from the general store across the street, a tall figure in a cream-colored shirt and brown vest, a worn cowboy hat shading his face from the relentless sun. He moved with an easy confidence that spoke of someone completely at home in this harsh landscape. As he stepped off the wooden walkway, he glanced in her direction, and their eyes met across the dusty expanse of the street. Beatrice felt something shift inside her chest, though she could not have explained what it was. Perhaps it was simply the relief of seeing a face that did not seem hostile or overly curious. Perhaps it was the way he paused, his boot halfway to the ground, as though he too had felt that strange moment of connection. He changed direction, walking toward her with purposeful strides. As he drew closer, she could see he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of creek water in summer. A few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and dust coated his clothing as though he had ridden far that morning. "Pardon me, miss," he said, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "You look like you could use some assistance. Those trunks are too heavy for you to manage alone." His voice was warm and deep, with a slight drawl that softened the consonants. Beatrice found herself staring for a moment before remembering her manners. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Lawson. Owen Lawson. I have a ranch about 5 miles east of town." He gestured toward her luggage. "Where are you headed?" "The land office, if you could direct me." "I'm Beatrice Donovan, Eleanor Hartford's niece." Something changed in his expression, a mixture of surprise and something else she could not quite read. "Eleanor's niece. I didn't know she had family back east. We corresponded regularly, though I never made the journey to visit her. Something I deeply regret now." Beatrice felt the familiar ache of grief settle in her throat. Did you know her? Everyone knew Alina. She was one of the first settlers in this area, tough as leather and twice as kind. She helped my mother when we first came out here back in '69. I was just a kid then, but I never forgot her generosity. Owen bent to pick up one of her trunks, lifting it as though it weighed nothing. The Hartford place has been sitting empty since she passed 2 months ago. Beautiful property, right up against the foothills. Good water source, sheltered from the worst of the wind. He spoke with such genuine appreciation that Beatrice felt a small measure of comfort. At least her aunt had been respected here, valued by this community. I'll take you to the land office, then help you get settled. Do you have plans for the property? Beatrice picked up her smaller bag, leaving the second trunk for him. I honestly don't know. I haven't seen it yet. I suppose I should assess the situation before making any decisions. They walked together down the main street, Owen carrying her trunk as though it were a sack of feathers. People they passed nodded or called out greetings to him, and Beatrice noticed the way he returned each acknowledgement with genuine warmth. There was no arrogance in him, despite his obvious strength and capability. The land office was a small building wedged between a barber shop and a boarding house. A hand-painted sign hung above the door, creaking slightly in the breeze. Owen set down the trunk and held the door open for her, following her into the dim interior. A thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles looked up from a desk piled high with papers and ledgers. His face brightened when he saw Owen. Owen Lawson, good to see you. What brings you to town today? Afternoon, Mr. Peterson. I'm here with Miss Donovan, Alina Hartford's niece. She's come to claim her inheritance. Mr. Peterson stood immediately, shuffling through a stack of documents on his desk. Of course, of course. We've been expecting you, Miss Donovan, though we weren't certain when you'd arrive. Please, have a seat. Beatrice settled into a wooden chair while Mr. Peterson produced a sheaf of papers tied with string. He laid them out on the desk, his finger tracing lines of text as he explained the details of her aunt's estate. The property consisted of 40 acres of land, a small house, a barn, and various outbuildings. There was also a modest sum of money deposited at the local bank, enough to live on for perhaps 6 months if she was frugal. The house needs some work, Mr. Peterson said carefully. Alina was quite ill toward the end, and she wasn't able to maintain things as she once had. But the land is valuable, and the water rights are secure. You could sell it for a fair price if you're not inclined to stay. Beatrice studied the documents, her mind whirling with possibilities and uncertainties. Return to Boston, where she had no family and only a few casual acquaintances. Or try to make a life here, in this strange and beautiful place that her aunt had loved enough to spend 20 years of her life. I'd like to see the property before I decide anything, she said finally. I can take you out there, Owen offered. I need to check on my cattle in that area anyway. If you're not opposed to riding in a wagon, we could go this afternoon. Mr. Peterson looked relieved. That's mighty generous of you, Owen. Miss Donovan, you're in good hands. Owen knows this land better than anyone, and he's one of the most honest men in Ventura County. Beatrice found herself agreeing, though a small voice in her head warned her about trusting strangers, especially men she had just met. But there was something about Owen Lawson that felt solid and dependable, like the earth itself. Within an hour, Beatrice found herself sitting beside Owen on a weathered wagon seat, her trunk secured in the back, rolling out of Ventura toward the foothills that rose like sleeping giants to the east. The road was little more than 2 ruts in the dusty soil, winding through scrubland dotted with oak trees and sage bushes. The landscape was so different from the green hills of Massachusetts that Beatrice felt as though she had stepped onto another planet. It takes some getting used to, Owen said, as though reading her thoughts. But there's a beauty to it once you learn to see it. The way the light changes throughout the day, the smell of the sage after rain, the silence at night when you can hear the coyotes singing in the distance. You love it here, Beatrice observed. I do. I was 15 when my family came west. My father had dreams of striking it rich in the gold fields, but by then the easy gold was long gone. He worked himself to death trying to find what wasn't there. Owen's voice grew quiet. My mother and I survived on Alina's charity for nearly a year. She gave us food, helped my mother find work taking in laundry, never asked for anything in return. When I was old enough, I worked odd jobs, saved every penny, eventually bought a small herd of cattle and started building my ranch. It's not much yet, but it's mine. There was pride in his words, but also a vulnerability that touched Beatrice deeply. She understood what it meant to lose everything and have to rebuild from nothing. I'm sorry about your father, she said softly. Thank you. He was a good man, just caught up in the wrong dream. My mother passed 3 years ago. Fever took her. Alina was at her bedside every day, reading to her, keeping her comfortable. He glanced at Beatrice, and she saw the depth of emotion in his eyes. I owed your aunt more than I could ever repay. If I can help you now, it's the least I can do. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough terrain. Beatrice found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with practiced ease. There was a quiet strength about him that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since leaving Boston. As they rounded a bend, the landscape opened up before them, and Beatrice caught her breath. A small valley spread out below, sheltered by hills on 3 sides with a creek running through the middle. Oak trees clustered along the water, their branches offering shade and grace. And there, nestled among the trees, was a small house with a sagging porch and a stone chimney. That's the Hartford place, Owen said, pointing. Your place now. Beatrice's eyes filled with unexpected tears. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, and she could understand why her aunt had chosen to make her life here. The wagon descended into the valley, following a track that led directly to the house. As they drew closer, Beatrice could see the disrepair Mr. Peterson had mentioned. Shutters hung crooked, the porch steps were broken, and weeds had overtaken what must have once been a garden. But beneath the neglect, she could see the bones of something wonderful. The house itself was solid, built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that would be perfect for sitting in the evening. The barn behind it was weathered but intact, and the creek sparkled in the afternoon sunlight like a ribbon of silver. Owen helped her down from the wagon, and Beatrice walked slowly toward the house, her skirts brushing through the tall grass. She climbed the porch steps carefully, testing each board before putting her full weight on it, and tried the door. It was unlocked, swinging open with a creak to reveal a single large room with a stone fireplace at one end. The interior was dusty and filled with the musty smell of disuse, but it had the same solid quality as the exterior. A simple wooden table and 2 chairs sat near the fireplace. A narrow bed stood against one wall, covered with a faded quilt. Shelves lined another wall, still holding a few books and dishes. A door led to what appeared to be a small bedroom. Beatrice walked through the space, her fingers trailing over the furniture, imagining her aunt living here, reading by the fireplace on cold evenings, cooking at the simple stove in the corner. There was a loneliness to the place, but also a sense of peace, as though the house itself was resting after years of service. "What do you think?" Owen asked from the doorway. He had removed his hat, holding it respectfully as he waited for her response. "I think it's perfect," Beatrice said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "I think this is where I'm meant to be." Owen's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. "Then I guess I better help you get it fixed up. That porch isn't safe, and you'll need those shutters secured before the next storm. The roof looks sound, but I should check it to be sure." "I can't ask you to do all that," Beatrice protested, but Owen was already shaking his head. "You're not asking, I'm offering. Besides, I meant what I said about owing Alina. This is how I can pay that debt." Over the following days, Owen became a constant presence at the Hartford place. He arrived each morning just after sunrise, his wagon loaded with tools and lumber, and worked until the sun began to set. Beatrice watched in amazement as he repaired the porch steps, rehung the shutters, and patched holes in the barn roof. He moved with efficient grace, never wasting motion, his hands skilled at every task. Beatrice threw herself into cleaning the interior, scrubbing floors and washing windows until her hands were red and blistered. She found her aunt's personal belongings in the small bedroom letters, photographs, a journal filled with observations about the weather and the wildlife. Reading those entries, Beatrice felt closer to the aunt she had never met in person, understanding the woman's independent spirit and love for this harsh but beautiful land. In the evenings when the work was done, Owen would sit on the newly repaired porch with Beatrice, and they would talk as the sky turned from blue to gold to purple. He told her about his ranch, his dreams of expanding his herd, his hopes of building something lasting. She shared stories about Boston, her lonely childhood as an only child raised by elderly parents who had both passed within a year of each other, her work as a seamstress to support herself after their deaths. "You could do that here," Owen said one evening. "There's not a decent seamstress within 20 miles. The women around here would pay well for someone who could make proper dresses and do alterations." Beatrice considered this, the seed of an idea taking root. "I'd need to let people know, perhaps place an advertisement in the local newspaper. Or just make yourself a nice dress and wear it to church on Sunday. Word will spread faster than wildfire." She laughed at that, enjoying the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he was amused. Over the past week, she had grown comfortable with Owen's presence, looking forward to his arrival each morning, feeling bereft when he left each evening. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew, this growing attachment to a man she barely knew. But her heart seemed to have its own ideas about what was wise and what was foolish. One afternoon, as Beatrice was hanging freshly washed curtains in the main room, she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. She looked out to see Owen arriving earlier than usual, and with him was another wagon driven by a stranger. Both wagons were loaded with lumber and what appeared to be bags of nails and other supplies. Owen jumped down and walked to her door with a purposeful stride that made her heart beat faster. "Miss Donovan, could you come out here for a moment?" Curious, Beatrice stepped onto the porch. Owen stood in the yard, his hat in his hands, and there was something nervous in his expression that she had never seen before. "I've been thinking," he began, then stopped and started again. "This house is fine for one person, but it's small, and that bedroom is barely big enough to turn around in. I was thinking, with your permission, I could add on another room, maybe 2, make it more comfortable for you." Beatrice was touched by his thoughtfulness, but she had to be practical. "Owen, that's incredibly generous, but I can't afford to pay you for that much work. The money my aunt left will cover basic living expenses, but not major construction." "I'm not asking for payment," Owen said quickly. "I have lumber from trees I cleared on my property. I have the time and I have the skills. I want to do this." "But why?" Beatrice asked, bewildered by his insistence. Owen took a step closer and she could see the intensity in his eyes. Because I care about you being comfortable. Because I care about you, period. I know we've only known each other a short time, but Beatrice, from the moment I saw you standing in the street with those trunks, something in my chest just knew. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, trying to find the right words. Beatrice's breath caught in her throat. She had felt it too, that inexplicable connection, but she had been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid of being hurt or disappointed. I don't expect anything from you, Owen continued, his voice rougher now. If you want me to just fix up this place and then leave you alone, I'll do that. But I'm hoping maybe you feel something too. Maybe you'd be willing to give me a chance to court you properly. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Beatrice looked at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who had worked tirelessly to make her new home safe and comfortable, who looked at her now with such open hope that it made her chest ache. I do feel something, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been trying to convince myself it was too soon, that I should be sensible, but my heart doesn't seem interested in being sensible. Owen's face broke into that transformative smile again, and he took another step closer. Then let me build you a proper house, Beatrice. Let me court you and see where this goes. I can't promise you an easy life, but I can promise I'll work every day to make you happy. Yes, Beatrice said, feeling tears prick at her eyes. Yes to all of it. He closed the distance between them then, taking her hands in his. His palms were calloused and warm, and Beatrice felt a thrill run through her at the contact. They stood like that for a long moment, just looking at each other, the future spreading out before them like the vast California sky. The stranger in the other wagon cleared his throat and they both jumped, suddenly remembering they had an audience. Owen laughed and turned to make introductions. Beatrice, this is Tom Martinez. He's a carpenter in town and a good friend. I asked him to help with the addition. Tom climbed down from his wagon, a stocky man with a friendly face and graying hair. Pleased to meet you, Miss Donovan. Owen's told me a lot about you and your aunt's place. I'm happy to help make it more comfortable. Over the next 3 weeks, the small house transformed before Beatrice's eyes. Owen and Tom worked from dawn to dusk, building a proper bedroom with space for a large bed and a wardrobe, and a second room that could serve as a sewing room for Beatrice's business. They added a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the house, providing shade and a place to sit during the hottest parts of the day. But even more than the physical structure that was rising, something else was being built. Each evening after Tom had left and Owen was preparing to head back to his own ranch, he and Beatrice would spend time together. Sometimes they walked down to the creek, watching the water flow over smooth stones. Sometimes they simply sat on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Owen told her about his childhood in Missouri, the long journey west, the struggles and triumphs of building his ranch from nothing. Beatrice shared her dreams and fears, her memories of her parents, her uncertainties about whether she could truly make a life in this wild place. "You're stronger than you think," Owen told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of orange and pink. "You traveled 3,000 miles alone. You decided to stay in a place that's completely foreign to you. You're working hard every day to build something new. That takes courage, Beatrice." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural between them. "I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. "And you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Those words wrapped around Beatrice's heart like a warm blanket. For so long she had been alone, facing every challenge without support or companionship. The idea that someone wanted to stand beside her, to share the burdens and joys, was almost overwhelming. As the construction progressed, word spread through Ventura about the newcomer and her relationship with Owen Lawson. Women began stopping by, ostensibly to welcome her to the area, but really to satisfy their curiosity. Beatrice received them graciously, serving tea and showing off her sewing work. Before long, she had her first commissions: a dress for a rancher's wife, alterations for a schoolteacher, a christening gown for a new baby. Owen's prediction had been correct. Word spread faster than wildfire, and soon Beatrice had more work than she could handle. She set up her sewing room with care, positioning her machine near the window where the light was best, organizing her threads and fabrics on the shelves Owen had built. One Saturday afternoon, Owen arrived at the house earlier than usual, and Beatrice noticed immediately that something was different. He had shaved, his dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean shirt that looked new. There was a nervous energy about him that made her heart beat faster. "I was hoping you'd take a ride with me," he said. "There's something I want to show you." Intrigued, Beatrice changed into her riding skirt and boots. Owen had taught her to ride over the past weeks, patiently guiding her through the basics until she was comfortable on horseback. She had discovered she loved it: the freedom of movement, the connection with the animal, the ability to cover ground quickly and see more of this beautiful landscape. They rode east from her property, following the creek upstream into the foothills. The path grew narrower and steeper, winding between oak trees and granite outcroppings. Just when Beatrice was beginning to wonder where they were going, they emerged into a meadow that took her breath away. It was perhaps 5 acres of gently sloping land, surrounded by hills that would provide shelter from the worst weather. A spring bubbled up at the upper end, feeding a small pond before flowing down to join the creek. The grass was green and lush, dotted with wildflowers in purple and gold. Oak trees ringed the meadow, their branches spreading wide and generous. "This is the most beautiful place I've ever seen," Beatrice breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "It's mine," Owen said, dismounting and coming to help her down from her horse. "I bought it 2 years ago with the idea of eventually building a house here. I've been waiting for the right time, the right reason." He took both her hands in his, and Beatrice saw that his were trembling slightly. Her heart began to pound so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Beatrice, I know we haven't known each other long by conventional standards, but I also know my own heart, and I know what I want for my future. I want you. I want to wake up every morning with you beside me and fall asleep every night with your hand in mine. I want to build a life with you, right here in this meadow." He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object. When he opened his palm, Beatrice saw a ring, simple but beautiful, with a small diamond set in gold. "My mother gave this to me before she died. She told me to give it to the woman I loved, the woman I knew I couldn't live without. Beatrice Donovan, will you marry me? Will you let me build us a house where our forever begins?" Tears streamed down Beatrice's face, but she was smiling so wide her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Owen, I'll marry you. I love you so much it scares me." "I love you too," he said, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Owen gestured to the meadow around them. "I want to build a big house, big enough for a family, with a wide porch and lots of windows to let in the light. A barn for the horses, a chicken coop, maybe a vegetable garden down by the spring where the soil is richest." Beatrice could see it all as he described it, the dream taking shape before her eyes. "When?" she asked. "When do we start?" "As soon as possible. I've been planning this for weeks, ever since I knew I wanted to ask you. Tom's agreed to help, and I can hire a few other men from town. If we work hard, we could have the frame up before winter and be moved in by spring." "Moved in," Beatrice repeated, loving the sound of those words. "Our home. Together." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the meadow, making plans and dreaming aloud. Owen showed her exactly where he wanted to position the house to take advantage of the morning sun and the prevailing breezes. They paced out the dimensions together, marking the corners with stones. By the time they rode back to her current house, the sun was setting, and Beatrice's heart was so full she thought it might burst. The next day was Sunday, and Owen and Beatrice attended church together in Ventura. When they announced their engagement after the service, the congregation erupted in congratulations and well wishes. Several women hugged Beatrice, welcoming her officially into the community. Men clapped Owen on the back and made jokes about him finally settling down. The pastor, an elderly man named Reverend Thompson, shook both their hands warmly. "When would you like to hold the ceremony?" he asked. Owen looked at Beatrice, letting her make the decision. She thought about it for a moment, then said, "Would 3 months be too soon?" "I'd like to be married before you start building the house. I want to be part of that process from the beginning as your wife." 3 months is perfect," Owen agreed. "That gives us time to do things properly." Those 3 months passed in a whirlwind of activity and joy. Beatrice worked long hours on her sewing commissions, determined to save as much money as possible for their new life together. She also began sewing her wedding dress, a project she worked on late into the night by lamplight. The dress was simple but elegant, made from ivory silk she had ordered from San Francisco, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Owen divided his time between his ranch work, preparing the meadow site, and visiting Beatrice. He ordered supplies from the lumber mill, hired workers, and drew up detailed plans for the house. On the evenings when he came to visit, he would spread the plans out on Beatrice's table, and they would discuss every detail together: the size of the rooms, the placement of windows, whether to include a pantry off the kitchen. "I want you to have a proper sewing room," Owen insisted, "with lots of natural light and space for all your materials. Your work is important, and our home should reflect that." His consideration for her needs and dreams made Beatrice fall in love with him more deeply every day. This was a true partnership they were building, not just a marriage in name but a genuine joining of lives and futures. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning, with the oak trees just beginning to turn gold and the air carrying a hint of the winter to come. The small church was packed with people, testament to how quickly Beatrice had been embraced by the community. She wore her ivory dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Owen had picked that morning from the meadow where their house would stand. As she walked down the aisle toward Owen, who waited at the altar in his best suit, his eyes shining with love and pride, Beatrice felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be. This was the life she was meant to live. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her with such tenderness that Beatrice felt tears spill down her cheeks. The reception was held at the town hall, with music and dancing and more food than seemed possible. Beatrice danced with Owen, with Tom Martinez, with various ranchers and townsmen who wanted to wish them well. She laughed until her sides ached, ate until she was full, and felt happier than she had ever thought possible. As the evening drew to a close, Owen helped her into his wagon, now decorated with ribbons and tin cans tied to the back by mischievous friends. They drove through the twilight toward the meadow, toward the beginning of their forever. Owen had prepared a surprise. In the center of the meadow, where the house would eventually stand, he had built a small platform and erected a tent. Inside, he had created a cozy space with a real bed, quilts, lanterns, and even a small stove for warmth. Wildflowers in jars decorated every surface. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be in our place," Owen explained, helping her down from the wagon. "Even if the house isn't built yet, this is where our forever begins." Beatrice stood in the center of the tent, looking around at all the care and thought Owen had put into making this special, and she felt overwhelmed with love for this man. She turned to him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "This is perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect. I love you, Owen Lawson." "I love you, Beatrice Lawson," he replied, emphasizing her new surname. Then he kissed her, and the world fell away until there was nothing but the two of them and the promise of all the days and nights to come. That winter, work began in earnest on their house. Despite the rain and occasional cold snaps that were considered severe by California standards, Owen and his crew made steady progress. The foundation was laid with care, using stones hauled from the hills. The frame went up, strong and true, and Beatrice watched with pride as her dream took physical shape. She continued to live in the small Hartford house, but she rode to the meadow every day that weather permitted, bringing lunch for the workers and watching the progress. Sometimes she helped, fetching tools or holding boards in place while Owen hammered. Other times she simply sat on a fallen log and sketched ideas for furniture and curtains, planning how she would make their house a home. In the evenings, she and Owen would sit by the fire in the small house, Owen's arm around her shoulders, and talk about their future. They spoke of the children they hoped to have, the horses they would raise, the life they would build together. On particularly cold nights, Owen would stay rather than ride back to his ranch in the dark, and Beatrice would wake in his arms feeling safe and cherished. By March, the exterior of the house was complete, and work began on the interior. The house was larger than anything Beatrice had imagined, 2 stories with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a spacious kitchen and dining area, a parlor with a stone fireplace that Owen had built himself, and her sewing room with windows on 2 walls that would flood the space with light. A wide porch wrapped around 3 sides of the house, with railings that Owen carved with intricate patterns during the rare moments when he had nothing else to do. "This is too much," Beatrice protested when she saw the full scope of what he had built. "Owen, this is a mansion compared to what most people have." "Most people aren't married to you," Owen replied, pulling her close. "I want to give you everything, Beatrice. This house is just the beginning. Besides, we're going to fill all those bedrooms with children, remember? We need the space." The thought of children, of raising a family with Owen in this beautiful place, made Beatrice's heart swell. She wrapped her arms around his waist and held him tight, breathing in the scent of sawdust and sage that always clung to him. By late April, the house was finished enough to move into. The floors were laid, the walls were painted, and the basic furniture was in place. On a Saturday morning, Owen loaded all of Beatrice's belongings from the Hartford house into his wagon, and they made the journey to the meadow together, ready to begin their life in their new home. As they crested the final hill and the meadow spread out before them, Beatrice gasped. The house stood proud and beautiful against the backdrop of oak trees and hills, its windows gleaming in the morning sun, smoke rising from the chimney where Owen had lit a fire earlier. It looked solid and permanent, like it had always been there, like it was meant to be. Owen stopped the wagon at the front steps and came around to help her down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he swept her up into his arms. "Owen, what are you doing?" Beatrice laughed, clutching his shoulders. "Carrying my wife over the threshold of our home," he said, mounting the steps with her in his arms. "It's tradition." He pushed open the door with his shoulder and carried her inside, setting her down gently in the center of the parlor. Beatrice turned slowly, taking in the room with its comfortable furniture, the fire crackling in the hearth, the flowers in a vase on the mantel. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," Owen said softly. Beatrice turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. Everything about it is perfect. Thank you for building this for us, for putting so much love and care into every board and nail." "Thank you for saying yes," Owen replied, pulling her into his arms. "Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who didn't have much to offer except his heart and his hands." "That's everything I need," Beatrice whispered against his chest. "That's more than I ever dreamed of having." They spent the rest of the day unpacking and arranging their belongings, making the house truly theirs. Beatrice set up her sewing room with great care, organizing her fabrics by color and her threads by shade. Owen moved his few possessions from the bunkhouse at his ranch, some books, his parents' wedding photograph, a beautiful saddle his father had made by hand. That evening, they sat on their new porch and watched the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and red. Owen held Beatrice's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and discover this is all a dream," Beatrice admitted. "That I'm still in Boston, still alone, still struggling to make ends meet." "Not a dream," Owen assured her. "This is real. We're real. And we have the rest of our lives to prove it to each other every single day." As the months passed and spring turned to summer, Beatrice and Owen settled into the rhythms of married life. They woke early, worked hard during the day, Owen on the ranch, Beatrice with her sewing and the vegetable garden she had planted near the spring, and spent their evenings together. Sometimes they read aloud to each other from books ordered from San Francisco. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, enjoying each other's presence. The Hartford house was rented to a young schoolteacher who had come to Ventura from Sacramento, providing Beatrice with a small but steady income. Her sewing business continued to thrive, with women coming from as far as 20 miles away for her services. Owen's ranch prospered as well, his herd growing, his reputation for quality cattle spreading throughout the region. In the fall, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Owen, wanting to be sure before raising his hopes. When she finally shared the news one evening after dinner, Owen's reaction was everything she could have wished for. He let out a whoop of joy, picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down again, afraid he might hurt her or the baby. "We're going to be parents," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Beatrice, we're going to have a child. Are you happy?" She asked, though his reaction had made it abundantly clear. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Owen said, kneeling in front of her and placing his hands gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything I've ever wanted. You, this house, a family. Everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Beatrice experienced bouts of nausea in the early months that left her exhausted. Owen was attentive and patient, taking over more of the household chores, insisting she rest whenever she looked tired. As her belly grew, he would spend evenings with his hand resting on it, talking to their unborn child, telling stories about the ranch and the horses and the life they would share. "You hope for a boy or a girl?" Beatrice asked one night as they lay in bed, Owen's hand on her swollen stomach. "I don't care," Owen said honestly. "As long as you're both healthy, that's all that matters to me. Though I'll admit I've been imagining teaching a son to ride or watching a daughter help you with your sewing." "We might have both eventually," Beatrice pointed out. "We have all those bedrooms to fill, remember?" Owen laughed and pulled her closer, careful of her belly. "One at a time, love. Let's meet this one first." In late May, as spring was giving way to the heat of summer, Beatrice went into labor. Owen rode into town at breakneck speed to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Ventura County. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Owen paced the parlor, wearing a path in the floorboards, jumping every time he heard Beatrice cry out. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the thin wail of a newborn baby filled the house. Owen froze, his heart in his throat, waiting for some indication of what had happened. Mrs. Chen appeared at the top of the stairs, wiping her hands on a towel, a smile on her tired face. "You have a son," she announced. "A healthy boy with good lungs, and your wife is exhausted but doing well. Give me a few minutes to clean them up, then you can come meet your son." Owen sank into a chair, overwhelmed with relief and joy. A son. He had a son. He and Beatrice had created a new life, a perfect blend of both of them. When Mrs. Chen finally called him upstairs, Owen took the steps two at a time. He entered the bedroom to find Beatrice propped up against pillows, looking pale and exhausted but radiant with happiness. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket, and as Owen approached, she pulled the blanket back to reveal a tiny red face with dark hair and eyes squeezed shut. "Meet your son," Beatrice said softly. "Meet Benjamin Owen Lawson." Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch his son's impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers curled around his much larger finger, and Owen felt something break open in his chest, a flood of love so intense it was almost painful. "He's perfect," Owen whispered, unable to look away from the tiny face. "You're perfect. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you for this gift." Tears ran down Beatrice's face as she watched her husband meet their son for the first time. This was what she had dreamed of during all those lonely years in Boston, though she had not dared to believe it could become reality. A home, a husband who loved her, a child, a community where she belonged. She had found everything she needed right here in this wild, beautiful place. As Benjamin grew from infant to toddler, the house filled with the sounds of childhood laughter and crying, the patter of small feet on wooden floors, endless questions about everything. He was a curious child with Owen's dark hair and Beatrice's gray eyes, fearless and energetic and full of mischief. Owen was a devoted father, carrying Benjamin around the ranch on his shoulders, teaching him the names of all the animals, showing him how to be gentle with the horses. Beatrice would watch them from the porch, her heart full, already feeling the stirring of their second child within her. When Benjamin was 2, his sister arrived, a tiny thing with blonde hair and blue eyes who they named Lucy Aliner, after Owen's mother and Beatrice's aunt. Benjamin was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to help with everything, bringing her toys and singing to her in his off-key toddler voice. The years flowed by like the creek that ran through their property, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. A third child arrived, another boy they named Thomas after Tom Martinez, who had become like family to them. Then a fourth, a girl named Sarah who looked exactly like Beatrice and had her mother's gentle disposition. The house that had seemed so large when it was just Owen and Beatrice now felt perfectly sized for their growing family. The bedrooms filled with beds and toys and the treasured possessions of childhood. The kitchen was always busy with cooking and baking. The parlor rang with music when Owen played his fiddle, and the children danced. Owen's ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the region. He hired several ranch hands to help with the work, good men who became part of their extended family, eating at their table and joining in their celebrations. Beatrice's sewing business evolved as her children required more of her time, but she still took on special commissions, wedding dresses and christening gowns and formal suits for important occasions. The community that had welcomed Beatrice all those years ago remained a constant source of support and friendship. When drought struck and threatened the ranches, neighbors helped each other, sharing water sources and hay for livestock. When fever swept through Ventura, families nursed each other through the illness, taking in children whose parents were too sick to care for them. When there were celebrations, weddings, and births and harvest festivals, everyone came together to share in the joy. Through it all, Owen and Beatrice's love deepened and matured. They weathered disagreements and challenges, learned each other's faults and forgave them, built a partnership that could withstand the storms that life inevitably brought. In the quiet moments when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful, they would sit on their porch as they had from the beginning, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the vast California sky. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked one evening when they had been married nearly 15 years. "Leaving Boston, staying here, marrying me," Beatrice looked at him in surprise. "Never, not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" "Sometimes I worry that you gave up too much. That you deserved more than a life of hard work and isolation." Beatrice turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "Owen Lawson, you listen to me. This life, this place, you and our children, this is everything I never knew I wanted until I found it. I'm not isolated. I have friends, family, a community. I have meaningful work that I love. I have you, the best man I've ever known. I have 4 beautiful children and this gorgeous piece of land to raise them on. How could I possibly want more than that?" Owen pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I love you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Beatrice replied. "Thank you for building me this house, for building us this life. Thank you for being everything I needed." The children grew, as children do, each developing their own personality and dreams. Benjamin inherited his father's skill with horses and his love for the ranch, announcing at age 12 that he intended to be a rancher just like his father. Lucy showed an artistic talent, filling sketchbooks with drawings of the landscape and animals around them. Thomas was the scholar, always reading, asking questions about history and science that Owen and Beatrice had to research to answer. Sarah, the youngest, was still figuring out who she would become, but she had a kind heart and a gift for bringing people together. Owen expanded the ranch, buying adjacent properties as they became available, building their holdings until they had one of the largest spreads in Ventura County. He hired more men, built additional barns and outbuildings, invested in better breeding stock. But no matter how successful he became, he never forgot the kindness that Alina Hartford had shown his family when they had nothing, and he was always the first to help when someone was in need. Beatrice became known throughout the region not just for her sewing skills, but for her wisdom and compassion. Women sought her advice on everything from child rearing to marriage to business matters. She took young women under her wing, teaching them to sew, helping them start their own businesses, encouraging them to be independent and strong. When Benjamin was 18, he announced his intention to marry a young woman from town named Catherine, the daughter of the general store owner. Beatrice and Owen hosted the wedding at their house, with the ceremony taking place in the meadow where Owen had proposed to Beatrice all those years ago. As Beatrice watched her eldest son pledge his love to his bride, she felt the circle of life completing itself, the next generation beginning their own journey. Owen built Benjamin and Catherine a house on the far edge of their property, near where the hills met the valley floor. It was smaller than the main house but solidly constructed, with the same care and attention to detail that Owen had put into every structure he built. When he handed Benjamin the key on their wedding day, he repeated words that still echoed in Beatrice's memory from that day in the meadow so long ago. "This is where your forever begins, son. Build it well." Lucy went east to study art in San Francisco, returning every summer to share what she had learned and create paintings of the landscape she loved. Thomas earned a scholarship to attend university, studying to become a teacher. Sarah remained at home for now, helping her mother and learning the skills she would need when she eventually made her own way in the world. As Owen and Beatrice moved into their 40s and then their 50s, their hair graying and their bodies showing the effects of decades of hard work, they never lost the connection that had sparked between them that first day in Ventura. They still walked down to the creek on summer evenings. They still sat on the porch and talked for hours. They still reached for each other in the night, finding comfort and passion in familiar arms. The ranch hands who worked for Owen remarked that they had never seen a couple so devoted to each other, so clearly in love even after so many years of marriage. Young couples would come to them for advice, and Owen would always say the same thing: choose someone you respect as much as you love. Choose someone you can talk to about anything. Choose someone who will stand beside you through the hard times, not just celebrate the good times, and then work at it every single day. Love is a choice you make over and over again, not just once at the altar. Beatrice would add, and remember that you're building something together. It takes both of you, contributing your strengths, supporting each other's weaknesses. It takes patience and forgiveness and the willingness to compromise. But when you get it right, when you find that person who fits with you like a hand in a glove, there's nothing better in this world. Grandchildren began to arrive, filling the house once more with the sound of young voices. Benjamin and Catherine had 3 children, and they were frequent visitors to the main house, the children running wild through the meadow, playing in the creek, learning to ride horses with their grandfather. Lucy married an artist she met in San Francisco and had twin girls who showed early signs of inheriting their mother's talent. Thomas married another teacher and had a son. Sarah eventually married a young rancher from a neighboring property and had 2 daughters. The house that Owen built continued to stand strong, weathering storms and droughts and the simple passage of time. The boards remained solid, the roof stayed sound, and the porch where Owen and Beatrice spent so many evenings still offered a perfect view of the meadow and the hills beyond. On their 30th anniversary, Owen surprised Beatrice by rebuilding the tent platform where they had spent their first night as husband and wife. He set it up in the exact same spot, furnished it with the same kind of simple bed and quilts, decorated it with wildflowers just as he had done decades earlier. "I thought we could spend the night out here," he said, leading her to the meadow at sunset. "Remember where we started. Celebrate everything we've built together." Beatrice looked at the tent, then at her husband, and felt tears spring to her eyes. After 30 years, he could still surprise her, still find ways to show his love that took her breath away. They lay together under the stars that night, the same stars that had witnessed the beginning of their life together, and talked about all the moments that had brought them to this place. The joys and sorrows, the victories and defeats, the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. They talked about their children and grandchildren, the legacy they were leaving, the life they had built from nothing but love and hard work and stubborn determination. "If I had known that day in Ventura what was waiting for me," Beatrice said softly, "I still don't think I could have imagined anything this good. You've given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, Owen." "You gave me purpose," Owen replied, holding her close. "Before you, I was just surviving, just getting through each day. You gave me a reason to build something lasting, to dream bigger than I ever had before. This house, this land, our family, none of it would exist without you." "We built it together," Beatrice corrected. "Every bit of it together." As they grew older still, moving into their 60s and then approaching 70, Owen and Beatrice made plans for the future of the ranch. Benjamin would take over the day-to-day operations, with his siblings sharing in the ownership and profits. The main house would remain Owen and Beatrice's for as long as they lived, and after that, it would belong to all their children equally, a gathering place for the family for generations to come. They celebrated their 40th anniversary with a massive party that brought together family and friends from all over California. The house and barn were decorated with flowers and ribbons. Long tables groaned under the weight of food. Music and laughter filled the air from midday until well after dark. As the party was winding down, Owen asked for everyone's attention. He stood on the porch, Beatrice beside him, looking out at the faces of their children, grandchildren, friends, and neighbors. 40 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his age, I saw a young woman standing in the street in Ventura, looking lost and scared and determined all at the same time. I walked over to help her with her luggage, and my life changed in that moment. Everything good that has happened to me since that day can be traced back to her saying yes when I asked to court her, to her agreeing to marry me, to her choosing every single day to build this life with me." He turned to Beatrice, taking her hand. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. This house we live in, this land we've worked, these children we've raised, this community we've been part of, all of it is possible because you took a chance on a cowboy who didn't have much to offer except his heart. Thank you for 40 years of love and partnership. Thank you for being my wife, my best friend, my everything." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as Owen pulled Beatrice close and kissed her, the same way he had kissed her at their wedding 40 years earlier. The gathering erupted in applause and cheers, and someone started playing a waltz on the fiddle. Owen led Beatrice down from the porch, and they danced in the meadow as the sun set behind the hills, surrounded by everyone they loved. When they were alone that night, back in the bedroom where they had slept together for 4 decades, Beatrice turned to Owen with a contented sigh. "I think we did pretty well," she said. "Looking back at everything, I think we built something worth being proud of." "We did better than well," Owen replied, pulling her into his arms in the way that had become second nature over the years. "We built a forever that actually lived up to the promise I made you in this meadow all those years ago. And if I had it to do all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing." "Neither would I," Beatrice agreed, resting her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "This is where our forever began, and this is where it will continue until our last days. Together, always together." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. Owen's hair turned completely white, and his movements became slower, more careful. Beatrice developed arthritis that made sewing difficult, so she passed her business to a young woman from town who she had trained, much as she had once been helped when she was starting out. But they remained active and engaged with their family and community, still offering advice and support, still hosting gatherings at their home, still very much the center of their large, loving family. On a warm spring morning, when Owen was 73 and Beatrice was 70, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The meadow was in full bloom, wildflowers painting the grass in brilliant colors. Birds sang in the oak trees. The creek burbled peacefully in the background. Owen reached over and took Beatrice's hand, his grip still strong despite the tremor that had developed in recent months. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Beatrice asked, squeezing his hand in return. "For everything. For this life. For never giving up on us, even when things were hard. For being the kind of partner who makes every day better just by being in it." "You built me a house," Beatrice said, gesturing to the beautiful structure behind them. "You told me it was where our forever would begin. And you were right, Owen. This is where our forever began, and it's been more wonderful than I ever could have imagined." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who had shared most of their lives together, who had built something lasting and beautiful not just in wood and stone but in love and commitment and daily choice. The house stood strong behind them, filled with memories of children growing up, of holidays and ordinary days, of laughter and tears and all the moments that make up a life. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, their grandchildren began to arrive for Sunday dinner, as had become tradition. The house filled once more with noise and life and love. Owen and Beatrice greeted each child and grandchild with hugs and kisses, listened to stories about school and work, and the small dramas of daily life. During dinner, with everyone gathered around the large table that Owen had built with his own hands, Beatrice looked around at the faces of her family. Her children, now middle-aged with gray starting to show in their own hair. Her grandchildren, ranging from teenagers to toddlers, the next generation carrying the family forward. Her husband at the head of the table, still handsome to her eyes, still the man who had captured her heart in a dusty street so many years ago. This was what they had built together. Not just a house, though the house was beautiful. Not just a ranch, though the ranch was prosperous. They had built a family, a legacy, a love that would echo through generations. They had taken a chance on each other when they were young and uncertain, and they had spent every day since proving that the chance had been worth taking. As the years moved toward their golden anniversary, Owen's health began to decline more noticeably. He tired easily, and his memory sometimes faltered. But his love for Beatrice never wavered, never dimmed. On the mornings when he woke confused, not sure where he was or what year it was, the sight of her face beside him would bring clarity and peace. They celebrated their 50th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children, gathered in the parlor on a cool December evening. Owen and Beatrice sat in chairs by the fireplace, holding hands, while Benjamin Reed allowed the story of how they had met, which had become family legend over the years. And when he saw her standing there with those heavy trunks, Benjamin Reed from a journal Beatrice had kept, he knew immediately that his life had just changed forever. He walked across that street with his heart in his throat, hoping she would let him help her, hoping for a chance to know her. Owen smiled at the memory, his eyes finding Beatrice's across the room. 50 years, and he could still remember the exact shade of her eyes that day, the way the sunlight had caught in her hair, the determined set of her jaw despite the fear he could see lurking beneath. "Best decision I ever made," he said softly, "walking across that street." "Second best," Beatrice corrected gently. "The best decision was building us a house in the meadow and telling me it was where our forever would begin." The family raised glasses in toast to that sentiment, to the house that still stood strong, to the love that had weathered 50 years and remained unshakable. That night, as they prepared for bed, Owen moved slowly but insisted on helping Beatrice with her buttons and pins, just as he had done for decades. They climbed into bed together, and Owen pulled her close, her head resting on his shoulder as it had on their wedding night and every night since. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I'll find you in the next life, Beatrice. I'll walk across whatever street I need to walk across to get to you." "I love you too," she replied, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. "And I'll be waiting. I'll always wait for you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, the way they had slept for 50 years. And in the morning, when Beatrice woke to find that Owen had passed peacefully during the night, still holding her close, she was devastated but not surprised. He had lived a full, rich life, and he had died the way he had wanted to at home, in the house he built, beside the woman he loved. The funeral brought together people from all over California, testament to the impact Owen had made during his 75 years. They buried him in a small cemetery on the hill above the meadow, where he could look down on the house and the land he had loved so much. Beatrice stood at the graveside, supported by her children, and spoke of the man who had given her everything. "He built me a house," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "But more than that, he built me a life. He taught me what it meant to be truly loved, truly cherished. He showed me that home isn't just a place, it's a person. And for 50 years, he was my home." In the months that followed, Beatrice remained in the house, unable to imagine living anywhere else. Her children offered to have her come stay with them, but she refused. This was where her memories lived, where Owen's presence was still tangible in every room, every board, every nail he had hammered with his own hands. She established a routine that gave structure to her days. Every morning, she would make coffee and sit on the porch, talking to Owen as though he were still beside her, telling him about the family news, the weather, the small occurrences that made up daily life. Every evening, she would walk down to the creek, following the path they had walked together so many times. Her grandchildren visited often, and Beatrice loved filling the house with their energy and laughter. She told them stories about their grandfather, keeping his memory alive, making sure they understood the kind of man he had been. She showed them the places that had been important in their love story, the spot where he had proposed, the platform where their wedding night tent had stood, the porch where they had spent countless evenings. 2 years after Owen's death, on a warm spring morning very similar to the one when they had sat together on the porch for the last time, Beatrice woke with a sense of peace she had not felt since he passed. She got up, made her coffee, and walked out to the porch. The meadow was in full bloom again, wildflowers nodding in the gentle breeze. She sat in her chair and looked out at the view she had loved for more than 50 years. And as the sun rose higher, painting the hills in gold and shadow, Beatrice closed her eyes and let out a contented sigh. Her daughter Lucy found her there an hour later, sitting peacefully in her chair as though she had simply fallen asleep in the sunshine. The doctor said her heart had simply stopped, worn out after 72 years of beating. But Lucy knew the truth. Her mother's heart had continued to beat for 2 years after Owen died, but it had been broken, and broken hearts can only go on for so long. They buried Beatrice beside Owen on the hill, placing her gravestone right next to his so that even in death they would remain together. The family gathered once more, now celebrating both lives, telling stories of the love that had built not just a house but a dynasty. Benjamin stood beside his parents' graves and looked down at the house in the meadow, the house his father had built with his own hands all those years ago. It still stood strong, still beautiful, still filled with the love that had created it. 4 generations had now been touched by Owen and Beatrice's love story, and Benjamin knew that countless more would follow. "They did it," he said to his siblings, gathered around him. They built a forever, and they lived it fully, every single day. The house continued to serve as the family gathering place for decades more. Benjamin and Catherine eventually moved into the main house, keeping it maintained, preserving the memories it held. Their children brought their children, who eventually brought their own children. The story of Owen and Beatrice became the foundation story of the family, the example held up of what true love could build when nurtured with patience, respect, and daily commitment. A great-great-granddaughter, a young woman named Eloise, stood on the porch of the house more than a century after it was built. She was a historian, researching family stories for a book about early California settlers. She had read Beatrice's journals, studied Owen's careful architectural plans, interviewed the oldest family members who remembered stories passed down from their grandparents. As she stood on the porch where Owen and Beatrice had spent so many evenings, looking out at the meadow that had been the site of their love story, Eloise understood something profound. The house was not just wood and stone and careful construction. It was a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other, day after day, year after year, through joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Owen had been right when he led Beatrice to this meadow and told her, "This is where our forever begins." He had built her a house, yes. But more importantly, he had built her a life, a family, a legacy that would endure long after both of them were gone. And Beatrice had been right too when she said it took both of them, working together, supporting each other, choosing each other every single day. Their love had been the foundation, and everything else had been built upon that solid base. As the sun set over the meadow, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had painted on countless evenings before, Eloise felt the presence of her ancestors in the space around her. She imagined Owen and Beatrice sitting in their chairs, hands clasped, talking quietly as the day faded into night. She imagined their children running through the meadow, their grandchildren learning to ride horses, their great-grandchildren gathering for Sunday dinners. The house stood strong behind her, weathered but solid, beautiful in its simplicity and the love that had created it. This was where forever had begun for Owen and Beatrice Lawson, in a meadow in California in 1878. And their forever had rippled outward through time, touching everyone who came after them, proving that true love, true commitment, true partnership could build something that would last not just a lifetime but for generations. Inside the house, in the parlor, hung two photographs in simple frames. One showed a young Owen and Beatrice on their wedding day, both looking serious but with happiness shining in their eyes. The other showed them on their 50th anniversary, gray-haired and weathered by time, but with that same unmistakable love still evident in the way they looked at each other. Between those two photographs, captured in those 50 years, was everything that mattered. Love and loss, joy and sorrow, children raised and grandchildren welcomed, hard work and sweet rest, ordinary days and extraordinary moments. All of it had happened in this house, on this land, because a cowboy had built a house and told a woman, "This is where our forever begins." And what a forever it had been.